Hey guys, my name is Nova, this is Film Express, and today we're going to be going through my favorite films of 2022. 2022 was the year in cinema that I've had the most disappointments. I don't know if I'm starting to get jaded or if films have just completely dipped in quality, the narrative standards have completely dropped, but I've had so many films that I didn't like or that missed the mark or disappointed me and didn't meet my expectations, so that the films that I really enjoyed, I enjoyed so much. I'm going to go through my ranking of my top 20. And before I do that, I just want to say again, Happy New Year to all of you. I hope you guys have a 2023 filled with happiness and success and some fantastic movies, because obviously that's what we're all here for. With that being said, let's get right into it. These are my top 20 favorite films of 2022. Starting at number 20, we're going to go with Ti West's first film in his new trilogy of horror films, X. X was such a nice surprise. I went in with super low expectations. I'm really critical on horror films in general, but X definitely tries to subvert the genre, not in the biggest ways, but it definitely tries its best to kind of bring something new to the table, and it was definitely more character focused, which I really like. What really hit me though is I watched X, then I watched Pearl, and then I went back and I watched X. My initial reaction to X was pretty positive, but after watching Pearl, I ended up really loving the film and saw way more value in how it was kind of planning the whole trilogy. You could really tell that Ti West and Mia Goth are on a super creative high right now. And again, I'm all for this trilogy. I think it could end up being an all-timer if Maxine is a good movie. At spot number 19, we have Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, directed by Dean Fleischer-Camp. Now, I've seen so many little short films and short YouTube versions of Marcel the Shell, and I've always been super into it. It's very cute. It's heartwarming. It has like a profound element to it. None of that could prepare me for how great the feature film was. It's super adorable. It has a lot of meaning. It has a lot of heart. And it was just one of those films that it just feels like a cute little warm hug. And for that, I think everybody should watch it. And I think it has a really good chance of doing well at the Oscars for the Best Animated Feature category. At number 18, we have After Yang by Kogonada. After Yang was a film that truly touched my heart. I haven't seen any of Kogonada's previous work until I watched After Yang, and then I kind of started doing the deep dive on his video essays and his little documentaries and his previous film Columbus. Kogonada is an incredibly talented humanist director. He's really focused on good narratives and bigger ideas, and his execution is just super interesting and different. I kind of have a weakness for sci-fi films that have a humanist touch, something like Her. After Yang is very reminiscent of that as well. It also has a bit of like Deus Ex Machina. I think that these types of sci-fi films are really the best types of sci-fi films because it takes huge technologically advanced ideas but makes them human, and that's why After Yang is my 19th pick of this year. At 17, we have The Batman. In all honesty, guys, I have superhero fatigue. I've had superhero fatigue for about 10 years now. There's been so many duds when it comes to MCU and even DC films, especially all the Zack Snyder DC films, and the Phase 4 of MCU have all been failures to me. I went into The Batman with like very low expectations. I was extremely impressed and extremely surprised by this film. Matt Reeves has a clear vision, and the whole film was drenched in style, and it was kind of the Batman that I've always wanted. If you look back on Christopher Nolan's Batman films, The Dark Knight is super entertaining, and it has the Joker, and it's super iconic in so many ways. Christian Bale's Batman was just not the world's greatest detective, which Batman is supposed to be. In this one, you have a new age Batman kind of in his first or second year of being a Batman, still trying to become the world's greatest detective. Everything felt narratively driven and character driven to a point where I was fully immersed into the story. And you know, it's basically a 3-hour film that breezed by, and it has one of the best performances of the year with Colin Farrell as the Penguin. So The Batman is my 17th pick of this year, and I'm definitely looking forward to the sequels. At number 16, we have Woman Talking by Sarah Polley. I saw this film at TIFF this year. I've been going to TIFF every year since about 2011 or so. Sarah Polley is obviously a critical darling and a Toronto favorite. Her films are always very highly rated just because of, you know, her status, but she's very talented as a writer and as a director. I cannot take that away from her. I was not prepared for how incredible Woman Talking was. From a screenwriting standpoint, from an acting masterclass standpoint, it excels on all fronts. It managed to be emotionally harrowing as well as hilarious in some other scenes. It had a very interesting tone. It was directed incredibly well. It obviously feels like a play at some points, but the scope of the narrative while small, is very, very hard hitting. And it has some of my favorite performances of the year, especially with Claire Foy. I think she knocked it out of the park in this one, but everyone has a different favorite when it comes to that movie. I just think it was a very, very timely film and an incredible film. The film can obviously be compared to something like 12 Angry Men. You know, it's just people talking in a room. The context of the film and the ideas that it's portraying are super timely now, especially if you guys know what's happening in Iran right now with the women's revolt. I feel like this film is something that speaks to a huge demographic, obviously, but not just to North American audiences, but it has a worldwide type of reach. And for that, I really, really appreciated it. At number 15, we have Vortex by Gaspar Noé. Gaspar Noé is a very controversial filmmaker who's made some really, really disturbing films. Enter the Void, Irreversible. I actually think that Vortex might be his best movie. It's definitely his most mature and his most elegant type of film. It doesn't rely on shock value just to get its point across. If you guys know anything about Gaspar Noé, he had a near-death experience a couple of years ago. He's recovered from that, you know, great for him. And because of his recovery, I feel like he's changed his approach on the types of films that he wants to make, the type of subject matter that he's going to touch upon. While this film has some of his trademarks, you know, whether it's drug use or just hard-hitting ideas, it's way more subdued. It's way more restrained. It makes for a film that is super rewarding and devastating. It's one of those films that just left me kind of shook. I ended my night with that one of these nights, and I was super sad going to bed after watching that film. It's the type of film that makes you kind of just appreciate your family, appreciate your health, appreciate your age, and it's a clear window into how the deteriorating mental health that comes with old age can affect everybody around you. So Gaspar Noé's Vortex was a pleasant surprise. It's definitely going to be a hard watch for some people, not just because of the content, but because of the style as well. But it's a film that I think everybody should watch. At spot number 14, we have Pearl, the second film by Ty West on my list this year. And Pearl, I feel like, improves so much on the groundwork that was laid by X. Mia Goth and Ty West, like I said, they're on a creative high right now. They wrote this script together. There's so much going on in this film. Pearl is definitely a masterpiece in all regards. I think that it could have actually even been a longer film. It's very short and it kind of gets its point across quick and it gets out. For that, it has to be commended. And it features one of the best monologues of the year. It's about an 8-minute dialogue scene or a monologue scene that Mia Goth puts on an acting masterclass. I think it's a shame that she's probably not going to get nominated for an Oscar for this year. She's definitely one of my 5 choices if it has to come down to, you know, my votes. This film is super stylized, it's super purposeful, and it has a clear vision. And again, once you start seeing the little Easter eggs and the little nuances that come back from X into this one, you start seeing the bigger picture, and it really hits hard. So Pearl is definitely a must watch. And there's a clear reason that Martin Scorsese said Pearl is one of his favorite films of the year. It's the work of a strong creative team at the height of their creativity. So at number 13, we have The Quiet Girl, directed by Colm Bairéad. It's an Irish film. It's a small little darling of an indie film. It's a debut feature as well by Colm Bairéad. It's a film that shows so much elegance in its execution. It's a film that is very strong in its content. You know, if this is Colm Bairéad's first film, I'm just very excited to see the types of stuff that he's going to make in the future. It's a film that takes its time. It's very patient with itself, but it places its chess pieces in a way where it really goes for the checkmate. It knows exactly where it needs to end up, and it hit me super hard. You know, I can't say that it's a film that you might want to watch multiple times. I think that the experience itself was super rich and super rewarding. It ends on such a high note that it leaves you with so many mixed feelings, and not a lot of movies can do that. So again, The Quiet Girl is definitely a must watch, I would say, this year. And it's one of the stronger debut features I think I've seen in a very long time. At the 12th spot, we have a film that completely took me by surprise. It's Barbarian by Zach Cregger. You know, guys, I'm super critical on horror films. I'm super critical of narratives in general and scripts in general. There's been, you know, over 90% of the films that I watch, I can kind of predict where it's going to go. Once I start getting a little bit of a hint of where it's going to go, you know, it's very easy for me to predict the story. Barbarian is one of those films that I went into fully blind. It took me completely by surprise. It was so entertaining. It's one of those films I just had no idea what was coming next. It's definitely not a flawless film by any means, especially in the last half. It gets a little bit ridiculous. There were a couple moments that almost lost me, but the whole journey in itself was, again, one of the more entertaining visits I've had to the cinema this year. It has an excellent set of performances, especially by Justin Long, who's just always welcome when he makes a return to the screen. I always find joy watching him do his thing in different types of movies, and I feel like he's really good in horror films. He was really, really good here, and it had one of the funniest scenes of the year, in my honest opinion. So Barbarian by Zach Cregger is an incredible debut feature film, and I'm fully on board to seeing what types of films Zach Cregger is going to do next, because if the amount of craft that he put and he displayed on Barbarian is any indication of what he's capable of, I think he's going to have a really, really good future in the industry. At spot number 11, we had a film that I watched pretty late into the year. I just watched it a couple weeks ago, and it wasn't a film that was completely on my radar, but a good friend of mine on Letterboxd recommended it to me. Fast and Feel Love, directed by Nawapol Thamrongrattanarit. Very hard to pronounce, and I hope I pronounced that right. I definitely butchered it, but I'm really sorry. Fast and Feel Love is a film unlike anything I ever expected. It's set in the competitive world of cup stacking. Right then and there, it's very different than the type of films that you would see this year. It's a film that is made from a standpoint of a love for film and a love for cinema. This film has so many unique film references within it. It had so many homages and Easter eggs to great films that have come out in the past 5 to 10 years. For that reason alone, it's worth watching, but the story itself was super heartwarming. It was super purposeful, and it's something that I feel like many people can relate to. It's all about growing up. It's all about appreciating the love that we have in our lives, and it's all about chasing your dreams while not being too selfish and hurting the people around you. I find that it was a really rewarding experience, and it's one of the more refreshing films that came out this year. It has a lot of similar stylings to a film like Everything Everywhere All at Once, but it was much more restrained, much more mature, and it had so much going for it. It had some of my favorite comedic moments of the year as well. So Fast and Feel Love was a refreshing, unique surprise of a movie. I cannot help but recommend it enough, and I think it's available on Netflix now. So definitely watch that if you guys have a chance. And if you're curious for a film that's operating outside of the Hollywood mainstream, it's a foreign film. Yes, there are subtitles, but it's a very, very solid and uniquely crafted film. And now we've gotten to the top 10. So I just want to thank you guys if you've made it this far into the video. Now my top 10 are the films that I truly love, that I would truly watch multiple times over. So I hope that you guys agree. And let's get right into it. So at the number 10 spot, we have Emily the Criminal, directed by John Patton Ford. Emily the Criminal is surprisingly one of the more tense and incredibly crafted films, anchored by a solid performance and one of my favorite actresses, Aubrey Plaza. You know, she's not a particularly versatile actress by any means, but she brings so much charisma to every role. And in this one, she was super grounded and super believable. And she really, like I said, she anchored the film in a really solid way. Now, Emily the Criminal is a tight script. It's one of those films. It's surprisingly a film that I would consider one of the least stupid I've seen this year. I think I've watched 212 movies this year alone from 2022. It's one of the smarter films that doesn't challenge or question the intelligence of the audience. It's one of those films that it's very believable. You almost can believe it could happen to anybody around you, and it's very relatable. For that, you know, I was completely engrossed into the story. It has a kind of a crime element. It has a bit of a love story. It has something for everybody in a sense, and it also has one of the stronger endings of the year. Again, super believable, super grounded, super realistic, surprisingly not stupid, which says so much, because many films this year just felt so dumb to me. So again, Emily the Criminal is a very surprising and unique feature, and I'm really glad I watched it. I feel like I initially rated it like a 3.5 out of 5, 7 out of 10, but I think the more I thought about it and the more I watched other films this year, it just elevated Emily the Criminal to a really high spot, and that's why it makes my number 10 spot on my top 10 list. At the number 9 spot, we have Top Gun Maverick, directed by Joseph Kosinski. Top Gun Maverick is the absolute best time I had at the movie theaters this year. It was such an incredible experience. You could literally hear people in the crowd cheering and hollering and getting so invested into the story. And yes, while it might have been a little bit predictable, it has sheer spectacle, and it's like a return to form to popcorn blockbuster films, something that we've extremely been lacking in the past couple of years, especially with the pandemic and everything hitting. This was one of the first theater outings I've made in a couple of years after the pandemic. So watching this on the biggest screen possible, I actually ended up watching this in Buffalo when I went to go film a documentary there. The crowd was super into it. Everybody was kind of at the edge of their seats, and it's an experience I will never forget. It's one of the most incredibly shot films of the year. It features one of Tom Cruise's best performances. It has a stellar cast. It improves on the original in every way. I'm not a big fan of the original Top Gun, but this film, it's made by film lovers for film lovers, and it's just made to entertain. Everything was tense. Every element was extremely impeccably crafted, and it's a film that I can definitely see myself revisiting many, many times throughout my life. So that's why Top Gun Maverick is my number 9 film of 2022. At the number 8 spot, we have an incredible Belgian film called Close by Lukas Dhont. Close is an incredibly heart-wrenching, emotional, and powerful movie that had taken Cannes by storm when it came out. Now it's kind of making its way into awards discussions for the Oscars and other awards. It's easily one of the more artistic and emotional films, especially LGBT films, that I've seen in many, many years. You know, it's something comparable to Moonlight in a way. And while it may not be flawless, you know, it's definitely not a flawless film. The second half can be really, really kind of miserable in a sense. The story and the places that it goes and the kind of genuine sympathetic approach that kind of crafts the whole movie is worth watching in itself. It's made with so much love and so much heart. I've known many, many people who were deeply, deeply connected to this film and found so many rewarding qualities to this film. I myself just found it super artistic, super incredible. It had a really strong vision. It was really, really powerful, and it's a film that I can't recommend enough. Again, it might not be perfect, but it has one of the stronger themes, stronger characters, and more genuine approaches of the year. And the first hour alone is worth all the awards. It's worth the price of admission. And that's why Close is my number 8 pick of this year. At the number 7 spot, we have Bones and All, directed by Luca Guadagnino. Now, this is a film that completely took me by surprise. I'll be fully honest, I'm not the biggest fan of Luca Guadagnino's work. I haven't had a really deep emotional connection to any of his films. But this is one of the more unique artistic films that I've seen this year. It's a film that had so many layers behind it. You know, it's very interesting that Luca Guadagnino and Timothée Chalamet made a cannibalism movie, especially when we all know what happened with Armie Hammer this past year and all of the stuff that was revealed about him. So I kind of found it a little bit ironic that they went and made a cannibal love story. This is one of those films that it kind of lends itself to analysis. It's not just a surface level cannibal love story. There's so many allegories here present, and I feel like so many people can take different things away from this film. It was extremely well crafted. The camera work was beautiful. The performances were solid. It has one of the creepiest, menacing villains of the year in any film. And you know what? It's a film that took me completely by surprise. I ended up enjoying it and appreciating it and respecting it way more than I thought I would. And for that reason alone, I think it's well worth watching. And I think it's the type of film that's going to age incredibly well. Like, it's going to be one of those cult favorites in 5 to 10 years. I'm extremely grateful that it was made available on video on demand very, very quickly after its theatrical release. And it also has one of my favorite scores by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. It's a score that elevated every scene in the film. It's a film that's extremely worth watching, and it's very divisive. I'm not going to deny that. I know many people who didn't like that film, but I feel like it's one of those films that you need to watch and kind of analyze every decision beyond the surface. And when you do that, it'll open up like a Pandora's box of hidden meanings and hidden layers. And that's one of the reasons why I think Bones and All is a very, very incredible film. And it's a film that I could actually see myself watching over and over again. Yes, it's gross. Yes, it's intense. Yes, it has some really creepy scenes, but it's all purposeful. It's very much worth watching if you're a fan of Luca Guadagnino or not, if you're a fan of Timothée Chalamet or not. There's going to be so much here to unpack. That's why I think Bones and All makes a very, very strong case for being one of the better films of the year. At the number 6 spot, we have a film that took all the film festivals by storm this year. It's a film that's kind of left a huge mark on the industry, on critics, and on audiences. And at number 6, we have Aftersun by Charlotte Wells. This is a film that, you know, I was already very, very curious about after I heard kind of all the hype coming from the film festivals. The reputation preceded itself, you know? And I've seen so many great reviews about the movie. Anytime I see this much hype about a film, I kind of go in very cautiously because I always feel like some things can get super, super hyped just because of recency bias. Like, a lot of people treat the newest film they've seen as if it's the best film they've seen. But I feel like all the hype for this film was extremely warranted. Charlotte Wells comes out swinging for the fences with her first directorial debut feature. And it was just such an impressively nuanced, multi-layered film. It's the type of film that, you know, it's kind of like an onion. As you peel back layers, you start revealing more and more. It's a film that's deeply emotional. It's kind of devastating in so many ways. It's kind of a clear and beautiful window into how mental illness can affect parents and parenting, how that pain can kind of trickle down to our children as well. It's not an easy film to watch, mainly because of the approach. It's kind of all home videos, and you're kind of just watching things unfold at its own pace, and it definitely takes its time. But if you give that film your patience, you will be rewarded with what is one of the best endings of the year, without a doubt. I'm not even ashamed to say that the film made me cry. It's a beautiful, beautiful movie. And it's a film I've been meaning to watch again, just because I want to kind of study the approach and study how calculated Charlotte Wells was with her direction in this. It has 2 of the best performances of the year. I really think Paul Mescal should be nominated for Best Actor for this one. And the daughter, the actress who played the daughter as well, her name is slipping me right now, but I feel like she gave one of the best child performances I've seen in many, many years. She was so natural. She had so much charisma, and like you could really feel her emotions in this movie. So that's why Aftersun takes a really strong spot at number 6 on the best films of 2022. And I'm definitely on board to see what else Charlotte Wells has, you know, what other tricks she has up her sleeves and what other films she wants to make. Because, you know, this one, it's the work of a strong director who knows what she wants. And I'm just very excited to see what else she can bring to the table. And now we're here at my top 5 favorite films of 2022. Again, thank you guys for making it all this way into the video. I really appreciate it. And without further ado, here are my top 5 films of 2022. At the 5th spot, we have the Tollywood masterpiece RRR. RRR, directed by S.S. Rajamouli, is one of the most insane, maximalist, extreme films that have come out this year. It's a film that I had no idea what to expect. You know, I'm not too big on Bollywood or Tollywood films, but when I watched RRR, I knew I was watching something special. It has some of the craziest action scenes of the year. It has some of the more interesting narrative beats of the year. It does something new in every scene in a way that you just can't take your eyes off the screen. S.S. Rajamouli has proven to be such a talented and unique visionary of a director. I think that it's no coincidence that directors like the Russo brothers or Edgar Wright and many, many other people have expressed extreme love for this film and an admiration for S.S. Rajamouli's directorial techniques, because this film, it's unlike anything you've ever seen. It's a must watch. It's a film that I've seen 3 times now, and the 3-hour runtime goes by like this. It's such a breezy film. Every scene kind of just ramps up the plot, ramps up the intensity. It's just one of those things that you just have to see it to believe it, because it'll have your jaw like on the floor. It's such an incredible film. It's such a unique experience. And it's something that I feel like everybody should watch. It doesn't matter what country you're from. It doesn't matter if you're not too familiar with Tollywood or Bollywood culture or cinema. I think this is a film that kind of transcends cultures, it transcends time. It's a film that I think is going to age extremely well. It's a type of film that shows that S.S. Rajamouli can do anything. And I don't think it will be long before we start seeing this type of extreme style kind of creep its way into Hollywood. Hollywood should be taking notes from RRR, and that's why RRR is my number 5 favorite film of the year. So the next few films that I'm going to mention are all films that I've rated 5 out of 5. They're all films that have extremely affected me. They're all films that I've seen twice or 3 times now. So with that being said, at my number 4 spot for my favorite film of the year is Decision to Leave by Park Chan-wook. Park Chan-wook is one of the most inventive, creative, and unique directors working in the industry for the past 20 or 30 years now. Every single one of his films is worth watching. Decision to Leave is easily one of his most calculated and amazing features. It's a devastating film. It's the type of film that when it ended, I had to almost like pick myself up because I was so emotionally affected by it. It has hints of Hitchcock, it has hints of other crime thrillers, but it's very much its own thing. It's a film that has creativity kind of cranked to 11 throughout the whole film, but it's also a mature and elegant and lush type of film. It's a film that you need to kind of be constantly analyzing everything, and that's truly the type of films that I've always loved. But Decision to Leave is badass. It's stylish, it's unique, it has some of the best music of the year, it has some of the best editing of the year, some of the best camera work of the year. It has one of the better narratives, if not the best narrative of the year in itself. Just from a narrative standpoint, it's a roller coaster of a story, and by the time those final moments hit you, I'd be hard pressed to find anybody who isn't just deeply, deeply affected by this film. If you're invested, if you've seen how the story unfolds and where it goes, it's one of those things that it just kind of leaves you speechless. It's one of the only films this year as well that once I saw it, I watched it again the next day, and I watched it again like a week or two after, and each time I found more to unpack and more to unravel. It's one of those films that it kind of lends itself to discussion. As soon as you watch it, you're going to want to talk about it with somebody. So Decision to Leave takes a very, very strong position at number 4 on my list of favorite films of 2022. I expected no less from Park Chan-wook, I'll be honest. He always knocks it out of the park. Now, the next 3 films are all interchangeable for my favorite film of the year. Depending on my mood or depending on the day you ask me, any of these next 3 films could kind of switch spots. At the number 3 spot, we're gonna go with Tar, directed by Todd Field. Tar is a thinker's movie. It's a film that I would classify as high art. It's also a film that I would say, if it was written as a novel, it would win the Pulitzer Prize or the Nobel Prize for Literature for this year. It's such an incredibly dense and rewarding film that touches upon a topic that is super timely, touches upon cancel culture in a way that no film has even dared to touch. Todd Field has come back to filmmaking after a 16-year hiatus, and he comes out swinging for the fences. He comes out going for the home run, and this is a touchdown. This is a home run of a movie by every standard. It has some of the most calculated cinematography of the year. It has one of the best performances, if not the best performances of the year, with Cate Blanchett. She gives her absolute all to this role. She's always impressed me as an actress, but in this one, she has kind of put all her previous performances behind her and crafted a new way of acting where it feels like something that's going to age extremely well. You know, she's honestly my pick for best actress for this year. There is no performance that comes close. A lot of people would argue Michelle Yeoh's performance in Everything Everywhere All at Once is worthy of an Oscar. I feel like that's 2 different classes of actors in my opinion. Michelle Yeoh was clearly having a lot of fun in Everything Everywhere All at Once, but Cate Blanchett is putting on a masterclass of a performance in this. She demolishes everybody else. This is very much her year. Tar is not only the most intense film of the year, not only the most dense film of the year, it's also one of the funniest films of the year. It culminates into a last act that's almost so funny. I could hear the whole audience snickering and laughing, unlike anything I've heard before this year. It had the audience in shambles just because of where it goes and the fact that it decides to go there so confidently. Todd Field is proving to be one of the best American auteurs working in the industry right now. And for that reason alone, Tar is a film that I've watched 3 times now. Each time I've gotten so much more out of it. And it's a very long film by all means, but every decision in that film is calculated and concise, and it's done with such a precision. It's like surgical directing. Like every cut and slice and decision was adding to a larger, bigger, overarching theme. It's definitely a thought-provoking type of film. It's the type of film you're going to want to discuss with people. It's a type of film that leaves you with ideas that might be challenging, they might be new, and they might be intense, but they're ideas that we all need to be thinking about, especially in a day and age where cancel culture is so rampant. People are so quick to be vocal about their inability to separate art from the artist. But I think Todd Field makes a strong case here that sometimes what we hear on the surface level about these artists is not always the clear truth, and that canceling people who've done such incredible works is not always the right decision. In some cases it is, though. When it comes to like Kanye West, you know, that's a discussion for another day. Cate Blanchett's Lydia Tarr is a very interesting, multi-dimensional, multi-layered character. and her character study is worth watching. That's why this film is my number 3 pick for best film of the year, but it's tied for number 1. On my number 2 slot of my favorite films of the year is Triangle of Sadness, directed by Ruben Ostlund. Now, this film is a film I saw at the Toronto Film Festival this year. I have never in my life heard a film with this much belly aching, uproarious laughter in the audience. I have never heard an audience go that crazy, laughing fits, almost in tears throughout the whole film. It's an experience I will never forget. And I know that experience is probably playing into why I love this movie so much, but the film is so nuanced and so multi-layered. It's one of those films you just have to kind of see to believe it. It's one of the funniest films I think I've seen, because I've never ever laughed as hard as I did in Triangle of Sadness. Like, the brand of humor was definitely working for me. I know some people who've watched this film alone at home on their computers or on their streaming services, and they didn't have the same type of reaction to the film that I did. That's why I think it's a type of film that you need to see with as many people as possible. That laughter was so contagious in the theater. It was unlike anything I've ever experienced in my whole life. And I've seen many comedies in the theaters over my years, but none that quite hit like this. It's obviously a satire of the rich, but it also has so much to say about like gender dynamics, about capitalism, about Marxism, about how all of that can flip on its head at any point. And it all culminates to one of the best third acts of the year, in my opinion. In fact, it was so unpredictable. I had no idea where it was going to go. Some of the lines of dialogue completely took me by surprise, and where the narrative goes is so unpredictable. It made for one of the most intense character arcs and character studies that I've seen in a very long time. Triangle of Sadness is like a masterclass of satirical comedy. It's a masterclass of filmmaking. It's a masterclass of setups and payoffs. Every little thing that was set up in the first act or the second act had a huge payoff in the last hour or so. It's something that you just need to see. And I really hope that you guys can have the same type of reaction that I did while watching this movie, because it's unlike anything I've seen this year. Granted, I've been a fan of Ruben Ostlund's past couple movies as well. Force Majeure is a masterclass. The Square is an incredible film, but I truly think Triangle of Sadness is his magnum opus. It's his masterpiece. It's kind of the type of film that his work has been leading up to in a very strong way. It's a film I've seen twice now, and each time I found myself laughing so much at different things. You know, it's kind of like the more you watch it, the more you realize the hidden layers of comedy that are there. I don't just like it for the comedy, to be honest. There's very clear tension without this film that is kind of written in such a masterful way. It was my brand of humor. It was my brand of narrative. It was everything that I look for in a movie, and it was done at an exceptional level. And it's the type of film that I feel like memes are made out of. It's the type of film that it's the kind of film that will leave an impression, and I think it'll age very well. And I think that even Woody Harrelson's very short role in this, his appearance in this film, is worth the price of admission alone. He had one of the funniest scenes of the year in this movie. So that's why Triangle of Sadness is another one of my picks for my favorite movie of the year, at the number 2 spot, but it's also tied for number 1. At my number 1 spot, my favorite film of the year, it's the film that I've thought about the most. It's the film that I've analyzed the most. It's a film that I had to kind of go and find the screenplay and read it and analyze it myself. It's the kind of film that I wish more directors were able to make. It's The Banshees of Inisherin by Martin McDonagh. Martin McDonagh has made some fantastic films in his career. In Bruges is an absolute masterpiece. I had a lot of fun with Seven Psychopaths, and obviously the Oscars really loved the movie Three Billboards, but I wasn't too much of a fan of that film. The Banshees of Inisherin is his magnum opus. It's his masterpiece. It's at the same time his biggest film and his smallest film. It's a film that takes place on a small island in Ireland called Inisherin. It centers on a feud between two friends where one friend kind of wants to end the friendship. But the fact that this film is like a bigger allegory for the Irish Civil War, where one side is fighting for independence and one side is fighting to keep the traditions and what they know alive, and both of them end up losing what they're fighting for in the process. That itself makes for one of the most interesting allegorical, metaphorical scripts and films of the year for me. It's a film that's so deeply nuanced, where everything is so calculated and so precise. It's a film that has some of the best performances of the year, by everybody involved, but Colin Farrell especially. I really think he should be nominated for Best Actor, not just for this film, but I really think he should also get a Best Supporting Actor nomination for The Batman. But I think that his performance here in The Banshees of Inisherin is my favorite male performance of the year. But if you guys know anything about me, screenplays are really my driving force for loving a story, and this has the tightest, most incredible script of the year, hands down. It's a mature, elegant, multi-dimensional, multi-layered, nuanced, metaphorical, allegorical script. It's everything I want in a movie. And yes, it can be a little bit bleak and a little bit depressing, but that's also the type of stuff that I kind of magnetize to when I watch a film. The Banshees of Inisherin is a absolute masterclass, and there's a very clear reason it's one of the highest rated films of 2022 by most people. Even on Letterboxd, it still has a 4.2 out of 5, which puts it in the top 5 or so of the year. So with that being said, you know, The Banshees of Inisherin is a film that left a huge impression on me. I had to seek out the screenplay and read it for myself, and it's interesting to see how well directed it was. Martin McDonagh had a clear vision from writing the screenplay and how he would translate that to the screen. It has some of the most incredible cinematography of the year. It has some iconic music, and the supporting cast just kind of brings the whole world to life in this one. And it has one of the best animal performances as well, with Jenny the donkey, and if you see this movie you'll know exactly what I mean. The Banshees of Inisherin, again, is the type of film that I wish more directors were able to make. I feel like a lot of filmmakers working and operating now in the industry are very surface level. They make the stories and it's like what you see is what you get. But with Banshees of Inisherin, it's the type of film where there's so many layers behind what you're watching that, you know, people can project their own meanings onto it for sure. But it's very clearly as well, it's an allegory for the Irish Civil War, which is super timely as well for the commentary that it's making about our current world and our current climate with the war happening in Russia and Ukraine. It's a film that I feel like it'll age very well, and it's going to become, I feel like it's a type of film that I could see on the Criterion Collection going forward. So with that being said, guys, that is my top 20 of the year of 2022. Banshees of Inisherin, Triangle of Sadness, and Tar are tied for number 1. The 3 best films I've seen this year, and I'd happily watch them any single day over and over again, just to analyze them, just to be entertained, and just to kind of pick up on the techniques of these masterful directors at the height of their craft. Some quick last notes here. My most underrated films of the year, they didn't make this list, but they're super underrated and they're not getting enough love or enough mentions. Broker, Stutz, and Brian and Charles, as well as Apollo 10.5 by Linklater. These are 4 films that I feel like are super digestible, super easy to watch, super entertaining, and while they may not be in my top 20, they are clear standouts in a year of messy, pointless movies. The most overrated films of the year, and this might be a super controversial take for some of these, but The Fabelmans is one of the worst and most overrated films of the year to me. Nope was such a misfire. It's a film that contradicts itself. It really doesn't know what it wants to be. It doesn't know what it wants to say. Glass Onion is one of the worst screenplays I've actually sat through this year. It's one of the worst films and one of the cringiest films I've seen this year. The Northman is a film that I was super excited for. I'm a huge fan of Robert Eggers. The Lighthouse is one of my favorite films of all time. But The Northman was such a big misfire from a director who was way in over his head this year. And lastly, I know this one is probably going to be the most controversial, overrated film of the year. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once is a film that's way too lowbrow, way too silly for me. It's a film that's trying way too hard to be zany and goofy, and it succeeds in many ways. And it has some great editing and VFX and all that, but it's a film that people are definitely overrating, and they're treating it like it's one of the best films ever made when it's really not. I also remember the reactions of people who watched Scott Pilgrim when it came out, and it was so unique and different in its execution that people thought it was the greatest film of all time, and it's aged very poorly. There are still a lot of people who like Scott Pilgrim, but it's kind of tempered down in its love and unabashed kind of praise. And I think that Everything Everywhere All at Once was a refreshing film after 2 years of kind of dry pandemic movies, but I think that it's not going to age very well. It's a film where I don't really understand all the praise it's getting. Now, the most shocking films of the year, films that kind of left audiences kind of confused, shocked, appalled, we're going to go with Blonde, we're going to go with Men, we're going to go with Babylon, and Holy Spider. There are films that really hinge on the shock factor, and they really hinge on kind of pushing people's buttons, especially something like Blonde or Men. And I feel like these films have alienated their audiences in that approach in itself. The most baffling films of the year, films that I expected to kind of like, but I scratched my head watching these films and just kind of confused at the overall purpose and kind of confused at the execution, and I'm kind of confused as how they even got made. That's White Noise, that's Emancipation, that's Speak No Evil, and Bardo. All these films where I was watching, and the whole time I was just kind of left with a what the heck did I just watch type of feeling. It's really unfortunate because most of these were films that I actually had pretty high hopes for. Maybe not Emancipation, but these are films that I don't think will age well. I don't think that they left a good impression on most people. And lastly, and if I have to mention one film that I have still yet to see that might alter the list, but I don't really have high hopes for, it's The Whale. I'm definitely looking forward to catching that as soon as I can. It may very well kind of shake things up on my list. I don't have the highest hopes for it, especially with all the middling reviews. I'm just going to keep my expectations low. It may very well come in and be one of the masterpieces of the year, but for now, I'm just going to say I haven't seen it yet, and it may shake things up, it may not. But with that being said, guys, thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you made it through this video, if you watched the whole thing, I really applaud you. If you didn't watch the whole thing, or if you skimmed through it, that's okay too. So these were my final summary notes on the year of 2022. There are definitely some surprises, and I know some of you might not agree with something like with my list of overrated films, but that's okay. There are still so many gems this year that we would agree on. And guys, thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great 2023 filled with fantastic films. I really hope that this year will be a step up from 2022, where I've had so many disappointments. My name's Nova. This is Film Express. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, please subscribe, please add some comments. Please let me know what your top 10, top 5, top 20 films of the year are. Let's have a discussion about it, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. See ya.